All right, everybody, let's get into the meat and potatoes. So what we need to do first is we're going to basically make selections of all the different parts that need to be raised for paneling or that we want to separate out. So that's going to include each one of these metal strips here and this metal strip here and this inner, I guess you would call that like a mesh, and then the lights. And we're also going to do a little bit of stamping to stamp out some of these black spots, at least for the height map, because these black spots are either probably rust or maybe they're just dirt or something like that that's on there from, I don't know, who knows, people spitting, who knows. But the point is that, you know, we don't really need this to recede in too much. I mean, we could just lighten it a little bit, but I'm thinking we're just going to stamp those out, maybe leave them slightly in the color texture, and that'll be it. We're also going to stamp out this little handle right here, just because because of where this is, no one's ever going to get that close to it, so we're just going to get rid of that little detail. So let's get started on stamping, and then we'll isolate stuff out. I'm just going to use my mouse instead of using any kind of tablet today. It's not necessary to actually have a tablet to do this process. So, all right, we'll start by stamping, and I'll just make an extra layer here, and I'll just call this stamps or stamp fixes, something like that, something where you know what it is. And we'll just get our stamp tool out. Healing brush works too, spot healing brush particularly, but the old G stamp tool is probably, I mean, it never goes wrong with that, even though the other ones are great. But let me just show the old stamp tool. Basically, you can hit S on your keyboard to get stamp out, but you hold Alt and you'll get like a crosshair, and you pick an area that looks similar. If you want to like stamp out a spot like this, you'll pick an area that looks similar, and usually you don't want it too close, maybe over here, and then you just click. You can see that what it does is it's actually going to show that area over whatever your brush is position then. So I just stamped that out. It's gone. Note that in this tool it says current and below, so what the stamp is going to be able to see is this current layer, anything that's on this current layer, and below. But if there were stuff above this layer, it wouldn't see it unless you have it set to all layers. You could also just have a current layer. So we've got our opacity and flow at 100%, so it should just basically look at whatever's underneath where you pressed Alt and clicked, and then stamp that to the new area. Now you can right click here and you can change the hardness of the brush or change the type of brush you're using. Sometimes that's necessary, but for this we'll probably just be using this. I'll do one more here. I'll just like pick an area. See, this is a little bit darker here than it is over here, so I'll pick an area maybe a little bit closer and just stamp this out. And oh, I changed it on accident. There we go. All right, so there we go. Now next I'll just use the spot healing brush so you can see how this works. So I just click on that, and so what's going on with this is that there's nothing on this layer so far, so I'd have to actually use this here, and then it will get rid of stuff. But it does a nice job at blending things. You know, for instance, if you wanted like this, there's kind of like a spider web or something here, or some kind of crusty dirt. You can do something like that and it'll just get rid of it. If you wanted to clean this up a little bit, you know, obviously you don't want to clean it up too much because you kind of want it to be authentic, but maybe some of that stuff won't do well in your bump maps, so you might want to get rid of it. Okay, so what else? I mean, there's also like the patch tool, which is interesting. The patch tool, again, you have to be on this layer. You can go ahead and like circle this, and you could actually, you can see there's a bunch of different settings up here, you know, diffusion and stuff like that. But we're just going to keep it like this, and we can go ahead and move this all around. It's kind of a convenient tool to sort of see what it's going to look like before you drop it. And I can hit Control D, and then you can see it just fill that in. So patch tool is nice, especially if you have something that's sort of an odd shape that you don't want to, use a brush for, like this maybe. You can kind of go like that, get right around it, pull it over here. So that should give you some of the basics of stamping type tools. Even though they're not all under the stamp tool, they're very, very similar in how they work. Again, a lot of times I'm just using the regular old stamp tool, hold Alt, pick a spot, and then just start stamping over it like so. You can see here, if you don't pick the right spot, it can look a little bit lighter. That's probably really, really hard to notice. If we go ahead and actually use some of these other tools, they are sort of content aware, so they're a little bit better at maybe mixing the edges. So they might work better, but it's also nice sometimes to be able to work on a different layer. So for this though, I think we can finish up maybe with the spot healing brush. Just drop it on some of these little spots that we might want to change. I think we'll leave that one, that's okay. I think that's pretty good. Let's come down here though. Let's talk about this handle. So I think what I'm going to do for the handle is, this is where sometimes the stamp brush is a little bit better because it's a little bit more precise. So, I could come over, let's say here, and just start stamping that in. Maybe grab something from over there, stamp that in. Maybe something over here. Now you see right here, I've just got basically like some of this line right here, so I might undo that. Maybe pick like right in the middle, so I know I won't hit that. Now you don't want anything to look like it's duplicated, so sometimes it's important to pick stuff that's a little bit further away. Another thing you could do, of course, is I'm going to pull out the lasso tool here. So you have a regular lasso tool, which is you could just draw a circle around something and select it, kind of like how we were doing with the patch tool. But sometimes the magnetic or polygon lasso actually is what I want. That works really well. So you can click once and it'll make like a straight line, then click again, click again, click again. You can do something like that. And from here, I could go ahead and just like copy the selection, but I may want to feather this a little bit, which means I'm going to soften the edge just a tiny bit like you would have on a soft brush. So you could actually soften it on a selection. So I can go ahead and hit Shift F6, or you can go up into Select, Modify, Feather. You can see Shift F6 right there. And a little window popped up on my other window. 2 is probably enough. Usually I'm using it like 2 or 1. It depends on the size of the photo. I'm gonna just hit OK. And then with my tool still open, any kind of selection tool like a marquee tool or your lasso tool, I can right click over this and say Layer Copy. So now we've got a copy of that. Can't really tell yet, but if I hit V on my keyboard, I can move it around. You can start to see. So now we got this whole copy here. So I can take something like this, Control T to free transform it. Hold Shift. If you hold Shift while you're rotating, it'll snap to increments of 15%. And I can bring something like this over here, hit Enter, and then I could go ahead and do a mask on this. So I'm going to create a mask. And what that allows me to do is if I take a black brush and paint it onto a white mask, it'll start getting rid of whatever's on this layer, so in that particular area. So let me go to my brush tool. So I just hit B on my keyboard, or it's right over here, and I can size my brush up by hitting the close bracket, and you can size it down by hitting the open bracket. But I can start painting in this black color, and as you can see, it starts basically just erasing. Now if I want to harden up my edges, I can go ahead and turn my edges a little bit harder, do something like this. And basically all I'm trying to show you here is that there's a whole bunch of tools basically to do similar stuff in Photoshop. You don't have to pick one specific one. You should know that there's a few of them, and pick the right tool for the job. Sometimes what I just did right there by just copying one area and bringing it over and then doing a mask on it is the least destructive way to do something, and it's actually makes it really, really easy to cover stuff up, especially like a big thing like this right here. So the other thing I could do too with this method is I could go ahead and change my brush. So I can go and look at some of these different brushes that they have in here. These are ones that come with Photoshop. I'm not using anything specific that I've made so far, but I can have like a black, that black color out and use like this etchy brush and kind of work around here and just kind of break up the edges so it doesn't look like they're the same. It's the same exact pattern that I took it from on the other side, so that it just makes it look more organic. So there's multiple ways to do this. I can come back down to this layer if I want to get rid of the edge of that little handle right there. I'm going to go back to the stamp tool and I'll just like select right here, and basically you could just stamp that out. You'll never see that area anymore, something like that. And so now between these two things we've basically fixed this up. So I could say like this is rim 3 fix or something like that, so I can go ahead and group these together if I wanted to. But let's actually now learn how we're going to basically isolate all these separate pieces. Right, so for this, basically I'm just going to go ahead and pull out the guides and put the guides right there like that. And then I'm going to go ahead and get my shape tool. I want my ellipse tool. And I'm going to hold shift, but start right at the crosshairs here. And I'm just going to hold shift and drag out till I basically get that circle in there. I'll make it like maybe a little bit smaller, like so. And once you do this, you can see that the free transform comes up right away. I can just use my arrows to move this around. There we go. I have to hold control. It's not actually, it's strange. Usually if you just hit the arrows, it moves, but it's making me hold control to do that. And that happens as like the control typically toggles on like the move tool. So I moved it right to where I want, hit enter, and now I have an ellipse there. So what I can do is I can just click on that while holding control, and it'll make a selection. And I can make a new layer, and I can just call this like light. And if I want to be specific, I can say right bottom or something like that, so I know which one it is. And then I'm just going to fill it with, let's say, white. So I'll do an Alt Delete, fill it with white, and then just Control D to deselect it. So now I have that shape there as a selection. And then what I can do is I can just duplicate this. So I'm going to go ahead and hold Shift and Alt, and you can see I get a double arrow on my layer here. So you could right click it and you could just drag it into here to duplicate it too, and then you could just move it. Okay, but I'm just kind of showing you the savvy ways to do this. So you hold Shift and Alt and you just drag, and then you can drag this right over, and you can see it almost stayed right in line too, because it kind of considers its original position. So I'm going to go ahead and just hold Control, which you can see toggles the move tool icon, and then I'm just going to use my arrow keys to basically move this right into where that light hole is. So that's going to be, this is all basically just like selection masks for these lights. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing, Alt and Shift, and I'm going to just drag up, and then I'll zoom in here and again hold Control, and I'm just going to use my arrow keys to nudge this into place. It's pretty close. It's pretty close to the right size. All right, same thing, Alt and Shift with the move tool on. So now if I had the move tool on, I don't have to hold Control, but if I have like the zoom tool on and I hold Control, then the move tool automatically comes on, and then I can use my arrows to nudge. Okay, but if you have the move tool, which is V on your keyboard, if you have that on already, you can just hit the arrow keys to nudge it right away. Okay, so now we've got the selection for all the lights. So what I could do here is, if I want to do this properly, I could say, LFT LFT bottom. This is LFT top, and then right top. And then what I'm going to do is group these so I can stay organized. So I just select the top one, hold shift, select the rest, and hit Control G. It'll put it in a group, and I could just say white discs or something like that. So we've got that all in there. You could hide it just like that. My stand fixes, I think I'm going to pull below. And actually this ellipse, I used this ellipse in the light disc, so I'm just going to drop it inside there. What that'll do is it'll put it at the top of the list here. But it's just inside there, so it keeps it organized. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I'm actually going to remove this here. And then I'm going to go ahead and show you how the path tool works. And the path tool is something that I use a ton in Photoshop. So basically the path tool is kind of like a reusable selection tool. You could make shapes out of it just, you know, to like do text or drawings or anything like that if you want to do like, it's a vector, so it's kind of like you would use in Illustrator. But I typically use it for selections because it allows you to make a selection in a layer, and it's easily accessible. You can actually stroke around it, so you can actually use a paintbrush and stroke around a path. You can select with a path. You can subtract from a selection with a path. So there's a whole bunch of like cool functions that the path tool lets you do, and it's very, very precise. So instead of like painting, you know, a mask or something like that, if you know that you just need like a very precise path, then the path tool works really well for it. So the pen, you know, I keep saying path. It goes in the path here. Weird. I must have hit a hotkey on accident. Let me just save this file off really, really quick. And just because I get nervous when that happens. I'm actually going to be using the pen tool, but it is considered a path. I just don't want to get that confused here. So the tool that I'm using is called the pen tool, but it goes into the path layers that are over here. So I know that can be a little bit confusing. But I'm going to go ahead and just show you how the path tool works. So if you do just a single click, so I'll start off with a single click like right here, then it just drops a sharp point. And then if I do another single click, let's say here, it just draws a path in between the two. And I'll just do that going all the way up to the edge here, and then I'll show you the Bezier function. So we're going to get to about right here, but right before we turn this corner. And then I'm going to click just on the other side of the corner, but I'm going to drag. And we get this Bezier that comes out. So basically, these are actually kind of like other points that are pulling on this path. So it basically allows you to do curves really nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and just now come all the way down here. Should be pretty straight, hopefully. And I'm just going to come all the way to the end here. Actually, so now let's say I drop one here. You could do two things if you wanted it to actually be further down. You could either grab it, which is using this direct selection tool. I could just grab this here, and I can drag this right over here. And this is why paths are so powerful, because it's basically like a selection tool that you can drag. And then you can just pull your pen tool back out. You can click on this one more time, and then like click over here, and then you can just drag out again, and voila, you have a nice little curve that goes around there. And then you can do the same thing. You just kind of pull this all the way down, come down to here. You can click, I'm going to click and drag this time, so I'm going to do like a Bezier on both sides. Because if you pull on this, you can like get a nice tighter corner with a bevel still. So you can actually kind of control how that bevel looks. And let me go all the way down here. And we'll go ahead and just pull this like so. And then if I click and drag while I'm on here, it'll actually allow me to draw out the Bezier from that point right there, even though it originally was a sharp one. Okay, so I've actually put in some extra points here so I can show some other functionalities. So let me show you this. If I go back to my direct select tool, obviously I can just drag this and I can move that around. I'm going to undo that. I could go ahead and I could hold Control and Alt and start dragging on this, and you can actually make this into a Bezier instead of just a single point. So that's one thing. You can right click on this and say delete anchor point, so you can just get rid of it altogether. You can right click right over the path and say add anchor point. If you right click, so let's say you're close, sometimes you won't see that add. That means you're not right over it, or that Photoshop can't figure it out. If you just drop that in there, for instance, if I go ahead and right click and say add anchor point, if I hold Control and Alt and it's already a Bezier and I click on it, it'll make it a single sharp point. So you can change this back into a sharp point if you want, or you can change it into a Bezier by pulling it out like so. Okay, but we don't need that for this. Let's just delete that one out. Let's delete that out. So now we're missing some. Or we're missing. Oh yeah, there it is. It disappeared for a second there. I thought I deleted everything. I guess I didn't. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just seal this up with one point, so it's a lot easier to deal with. The key of being efficient with this is to have just the amount of points you need and not too many. So that since that goes all the way down the line, I think that's good. I just hit enter to kind of complete it. If you come over here, you'll see that it says work path, and what you want to do is you want to double click this and you want to give it a name. So we could just say like outer path or something like that, or you could just leave it as path 1, which is what the name is that it gives it. So we could go ahead and redraw the rest of these, but we could also just do this. This is what's nice too, is I could select this, just duplicate it. I could say outer path, inner, or something like that. It's kind of an oxymoron, but I think I'll figure it out. So while I'm on this, if I hit Control T, we remember that we have this this transform we can use on this. So I'm going to hold Shift and Alt at the same time, and it actually will allow me to scale this in right towards the center. It'll basically use the center point to start scaling it in. So actually, now that I think about it, I think if I just hold Alt, it'll do that, yeah, and it'll keep it square. So that's basically what you want to do. So if you just hold Alt, basically want to get it lined up so I can isolate this inner part, or this inner side right here. I can just hit enter, and then because it's a path tool, you just come over to your selection tool here and you can select on these edges and just go ahead and do some minor adjustments, and you can get a nice selection going there. So we can just kind of pull that in like that, and you can see like how easy that is to fix that up. So I mean, the other alternative, like the way I've seen a lot of people do this, some people will just paint like masks and paint selections and stuff like that. I kind of just figure that that because of the fact that I may need to change this or it might not be perfect, I'd rather just lay out a path, and I know that I can come back and fix it, and I'll always have that selection there. You could actually save selections too, but it's basically like just saving out a mask. It's the same concept if you save a selection out. And because I'm showing you this, I mean I could show you where save selection is too, but I won't use it the rest of the time. But if you go to select, and there is a save selection right here, and then you could load selection. I like just having my paths right here in this little box that I can just alter and duplicate and scale and stuff like that on command. So obviously you can pick whatever works best for you, but that's just my 2 cents, and I'm always right, so you probably should go with mine. Okay, no, I'm just one person, and there's always like a gazillion ways to do this stuff, so by all means, like, explore and see what works for you. So I just found that this is the way I like to do it. Okay, so here's how this works now. So we've got this outer one, and then we've got the inner one. So what we can do is select the outer one, and you could just click this the marching ant selection tool down here. It'll select it, And then we can select the second path that we made, and then we hold Alt and click on this little marching ant selection tool, and it will say, what do you want to do here? And we have these. We could, new selection, add to selection. That one we can't add to it because we're inside of it. And we could say intersect, so if we had like something that was intersecting. But I want to subtract, so I'm going to hit OK. And now we've got this perfect selection that, works all the way around there. And so from there, what I do is I come down to this, and I got to make sure I'm on like a marquee tool or the lasso tool or something like that. And right click and say layer via copy. So we're going to copy that, and so I'll just like call this like outer rim. Sounds good. Okay, so we've got our outer rim. We're going to eventually grayscale this because, like I said, it's going to be like a bump. But we're just going to keep going, and I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of these. So I don't want to actually have to record that because I think you sort of understand the concept here of how the path tool works. I showed you basically most of the essential things you need to know. So what I'll do is I'll do it off camera, and then I'll come back and just show the work after it's done. Okay, almost done, but I'm going to go ahead and just give a little reminder how I'm doing this. I'm holding Alt. I'm just selecting like this outer one right here. Actually, it's kind of the mid outer. Holding Alt, dragging in. This is so I can isolate this inner little grate area here. And then I come down and I check it. It's pretty close, but it might not be close on all the areas. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it a little bit. Probably easier to zoom out than zoom back in. And that's pretty good. You want to like make it tight, but at the same time, don't waste time on stuff that nobody will ever see either. So kind of like a nice balance between speed and efficiency type of thing. Something like that should work. You can see just pulling one end up will usually like tighten it up. And there you go. So now we have all those different layers. I haven't actually selected any other ones, so I can go ahead and start doing that. Like I can come out to here, right click, get my marquee tool out by pressing M, hit layer via copy. So I can name this right away, like great, inner, something like that. Go back to the path. So now we have the inner path and for the mid and the outer. So we would select the outer first, select the inner, and then hold Alt and select this, and then we want it on subtract, which is already on. Come back to this layer, right click, layer via copy. And so we can treat all these differently now, so we can independently do different stuff to that, and you'll see how that's going to work out in just a little second here. So now that we've got all of these things separated, we can also get basically like a layer for this whole flat area. So the way I would do that is I would come to the outermost path, do a selection on that. Okay, so we've got this selected here, and if we inverse that selection, which is Control Shift and I together, that's invert select. That's also up in here, inverse right here. Control Shift I. Then we could come to these little light discs that we have in here, okay? And we can just, over the little swatch here, we can hold Alt and Control and click on that, and it'll actually subtract those areas out. So I'm going to go to each one of these layers and keep holding Control and Alt and clicking on them. So now you can see that we have this outer area completely isolated. So we could go ahead and just make a layer selection for that. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm actually going to drag this outside of here, and I will just go ahead and hit Alt Delete. I'll paste in the white, and I will call this, I don't know, flat boring area, something like that. All right, flat boring area. We can hide that. All right, so in Control D, deselect. Everything now basically has a selection. The only thing I didn't do is basically like select these little hinges here. That's easy enough. I mean, if you want to do like a little layer for that, you could just basically do that with you know, your lasso tool with your magnetic lasso. If you want to add to the lasso tool, and you could go hold shift, you can see a plus comes up, and then you can add to the selection. So, and then also if you want to subtract from it, you hold alt. So if you hold alt, you can see that it will subtract from the tool. Marquee, layer via copy, and we'll call this hinges. Hinges. If I can spell. There we go. We probably won't really need this selection then. Okay, we'll just get rid of that. Okay, so now we've got pretty much everything selected. The only thing that I'll want to do is I'm going to do like kind of like this raised lip right here that's going to go outside the light, but I think I'm going to handle that a little bit later after everything else is done. So now it's time, since we have everything selected, to stop this video and move on to the next one. And in the next one, we'll actually start, you know, processing these to make them grayscale. We'll get basically color selections out, and we'll invert some of the, you know, some of the different values in here so that we can make the proper maps for them. All right, see you in the next.